Our guests today are Peter Berk. Hi, Peter.
Doris,
And,
how are you?
and Jordon Berk. Hey, Jordon.
Thanks for having us.
You guys are descendants of the late author Howard Berk, who penned the Rockford Files, Mission Impossible, and many other titles that we would recognize. Before we talk about Jordan's very first book, because that's really one of the things that we're here to talk about, Peter, tell us, how many titles have you published, and just briefly describe maybe the latest one that's coming out?
Um, the one that's coming out October 1st is called First Line of Defense. It's sort of timely given the presidential elections coming up, although it's not a partisan book or anything, but it is a White House murder mystery with the president and his son. So that'll be my third published novel, all with Ingram Elliott, which also published Jordan's book. And there are several in the pipeline that have been written but won't come out for a few more months or a couple of years even.
Good.
But First Line of Defense was actually the first one I wrote many years ago, and the others were more recent during COVID.
Okay. Well, now let's turn to Jordon. Jordon, The TIMESTREAM Verdict is your very first novel, right?
It is, yeah.
And it's a time travel. How? Tell me the storyline first.
Sure. It's set around a time travel murder and the murder trial that results, and the jury for that trial is pulled in from across time to represent the varied time stream, since they're the ones who are best equipped to deliberate on that. So that's kind of the setup, but as you may imagine, the story is a lot more complex than that, and has a lot of the fun time travel tropes in terms of the protagonist kind of like jumping into the future and being amazed by everything and all of the futuristic technology, and then there's more jumping around in time beyond that as well.
Right. It's a twisty, turny kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it will be released by Ingram Elliott in October. Is that right?
It actually is already published September
Oh,
10th, so just a couple
okay.
weeks
Okay.
out.
I mean, how would you categorize this story? Because yes, it's time travel, but it also seems to be what else?
Yeah. I mean, I would still say it's primarily time travel, but it definitely mixes in elements of like courtroom thriller and a little bit of mystery as well, especially towards the end. So, it's got something for everyone, I think,
And even
especially.
a little, and even a little romance, right?
Maybe not a main theme, I would say, but it doesn't ignore that element of
How, how
human.
did you come up with the idea to meld time travel together with a legal mystery?
Um, well, that's part of what makes the timing of our two books so serendipitous and wonderful, is that the original story actually came from my dad, or at least the original pitch. So he said, "What if there was a jury that was composed of time travelers?" It was like that was his entire elevator pitch, and he didn't know that I would ever have any ambition for writing a story, never mind an entire book. But something about that, that question or that idea really, stuck in my mind, and I built it off of that. So, once I had that seed, the rest of the story kind of developed around it and grew and blossomed out of that.
So you didn't really know that you were going to follow in your grandfather and father's footsteps as
Not
a
at
writer?
all. No, I didn't think I had the capability or desire. But once I found the right story, I found out that I have both.
Okay. And this story is quite complex, as you said earlier. How did you keep track of all the multiple timelines and characters?
Well, I definitely had some meticulous outlining in place because it was absolutely required. It's actually starts in the future and then returns to the past, and all of that interrelates. So everything that happens or that we learn in the future has to have we have to see it happen essentially by the end of the book. Um, but some of it I just kind of made up as I went along. I wrote myself into a corner and then figured out how to get out of that corner, especially like the smaller elements. And you're right that there is a lot of complexity to it just by nature of being a time travel book and you know the minutia of courtroom deliberation. But I would say like overall it's actually quite simple in terms of the story. So I think you know people who aren't necessarily like time travel purists will get a lot out of it as well.
That's true. I did, and I don't really usually read that sort of thing, but it was a lot of fun. What are some tricks of the trade or lessons that you've learned about writing from your grandfather and your father?
Well, especially with my father, definitely um, stick with it if it's something you love. I mean, he worked his whole life for um, you know to get the chance to publish a novel, and it's been amazing to see it happen in the last few years, and that was very inspiring. And but even in my case, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't enjoy it. Like I didn't feel any pressure, you know, from the generational legacy. But at the same time, you know, I was aware of that and you know, kind of wanted to honor that and bring another generation, add another generation of sci-fi novelist.
What's been the most challenging part about writing your very first book, especially with Dad looking over your shoulder? Peter, how did you encourage him?
The irony is I didn't, for one very simple reason. Nobody other than his wife had any idea that he was writing a novel. He kept it completely secret. Not,
Really?
not, you know, because we're not close. We're very close, but I think he just wanted to pursue it on his own and see it through. And so I never knew about it or heard anything about it until he presented it to me on Father's Day when 2 years ago, Jordan.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I was obviously surprised and thrilled and frankly a little bit nervous, you know, because you know, as a dad, you wonder, well, what if it's not that great? What do I say? You know, I love him. I want to support everything he does. But that fear dissipated about 2 pages into the book when I realized he's not only quite good, but he's exceptionally good. His writing I found to be better than mine for sure, and just beautifully, beautifully written. And so it wasn't a matter of encouraging him to do it. I had a few notes and ideas and that we talked about after I read it, but they were very minor. And the only thing I could do at that point was take it to Ingram Elliott and hope that they agreed, and they did. And they
Yes,
don't
because
normally,
that's your publisher as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they're a great, it's a traditional publisher. It's not a self-publishing company. They
Right.
don't, up until I think my first book, Time Lock, a couple of years ago, they were not really turning out science fiction or anything, you know, in that genre, but they they were obviously open to reading Jordan's book, which is especially, you know, sci-fi, and they loved it. And I I just couldn't be more impressed. So I all I can do now is encourage him to keep doing it. He has a great full-time job as a software engineer. Jordan is not a tortured artist like I was all my life, like just trying, you know, trying to get a book published or a screenplay. You know, that's been on my mind every day. Jordan has a very successful career, and if he didn't write a book, he'd be totally fine. not to put words in your mouth, but
Uh,
so he was able to pursue it just as he said, just for the love of it, not because he felt pressure or
Sure.
anything but positive about it.
Well, Jordan, are there times when you felt like you just wanted to quit, not finish it? Or,
Not really. No, I had the implicit motivation of what my dad mentioned of that Father's Day gift, and I think having that date in front of me was incredibly motivating. Um, I started it in July and finished it June the following year, right before Father's Day. And by finished, obviously, it had a lot after that initial version of the manuscript, but finished the first draft. And but no, I really there were definitely points where I wondered if it was going to happen, not necessarily by a certain date, but just at all. Like, can I actually write an entire courtroom, an entire act in a courtroom? Like, can I write at all? I mean, I didn't, I'd never written any fiction really before I started. So the
wow.
challenges and that was not so much about stopping or starting. It was just like self-doubt along the way.
How much editing did the novel undergo
Um,
from you and your publisher?
yeah. So for the most part, it was pretty short when I started, about 10,000 words shorter than the final version. And I was aware that that it needed to be fleshed out a bit more. And over the course of the next year, I guess, or 8 months, with the help of my dad and some other early readers, including my wife, I got lots of amazing feedback and that I incorporated in. But the actual like formal editing through the publisher was a great process. Like I agreed with essentially everything that they suggested. It only made it that much better.
Right. Is there any interest in the story for film or TV? And does your grandfather's success open any doors for you in that direction?
I'm not sure it opens any doors necessarily, but um, it definitely that is a goal that would be incredible and really fulfilling. Um, you know, I didn't necessarily write it to be a to be on the screen, but it does adapt very naturally. Um, so yeah, I mean, I know Ingram Elliott as a publisher, that's one of their areas of focus and strength is trying to connect novels with film or TV
Right.
adaptation. So I know that's what they're pursuing for all of our novels, not just the two from fall. And yeah, it goes without saying that would be incredible.
Yeah. And Peter, do you think that writing is just encoded in your family DNA? Is it nurture or Newton or what? Nature?
Apparently, it certainly seems to be. Now we can look forward to Jordan's very young children being the next generation. But I mean, it doesn't always work that way. My mom was an exceptionally talented artist, and I draw at my age, I still draw like I'm a 3-year-old. Honestly, Jordan's 3-year-old can draw better than I can. So sometimes things are not inherited. My dad was certainly a better writer than I'll ever be, but I did have the chance to work with him, and we wrote
You
three,
co-authored, yeah, a couple of
yeah,
books.
three screenplays together, and I used those screenplays as the basis for the Time Lock series of which is still ongoing with Ingram Elliott. And Jordan's right; they do love projects that either are already in screenplay form, which is the case with the Time Lock books, and First Line of Defense is also a script, and I'm sure they would love if Jordan's book was translated. But to answer your question, I've always loved writing. I've made my living mostly in public relations, which was never my first choice, but at least there was writing involved. it wasn't the kind of writing that, I wanted to be doing, but it was writing. So yes, it's definitely been encoded. And I loved my dad wrote Columbo and all the other shows you mentioned. And I loved those shows. I mean, I wasn't, it's not as if I was forced to watch things that he wrote that were not my taste. Uh, he was a great writer, and so the chance to write with him was very inspiring. And to be able to honor his memory now with these books
Yes.
that
Two more generations. Yeah, yeah. Peter, how was your own journey toward getting published? I mean, did it take you a long time to publish your first book?
Well, in the grand scheme of life, decades, but
Right.
but in terms of the actual book, what happened was, uh, like everyone else, I was, staying at home most of the time when COVID hit. Many of my public relations clients went out of business, or couldn't continue. A lot of restaurants, things like that. So I was stuck at home with very little to do, and I just thought, what if I novelized one of our scripts that I wrote with my dad? And that was, I don't know, 3, 4 years ago. And it didn't take that long because we already had the script and I used a lot of the dialogue. So then it was a matter of shopping it around, and that took probably a couple of months of just random queries to everyone I could find. And within 2 days, two publishers wrote back. One of them just said, "Sounds great. We'll send you a contract," but with no notes. They hadn't even read it.
Wow.
And Ingram Elliott came back with like 8 pages of notes. And like Jordon said, I agreed with pretty much everything. There weren't major changes, but great suggestions. So it didn't take that long, once the book was out there. The irony of it, Doris, was that my book was so short. When you translate a screenplay into a book, it's a screenplay is only 120 pages, and even when I expanded on it, it was still only 160 pages. So I wrote a whole second part, and I thought, and that's what I sent to them. And ironically, they came back and said, "No, we like short books that you can read on." So the second half became the sequel, and they've been great.
That's great. But okay, Jordon, I must ask you, do you really think that we can time travel?
Well, I wish, because in the book it really helps civilization a lot with a lot of technological improvements. But no, I don't think so. I don't think it's a realistic technology. Certainly not traveling backwards. I think traveling forwards with like Einsteinian physics is semi-possible, but wouldn't really, not quite the traditional fictional version of time travel.
Okay, so either of you, any advice for new writers who are trying to become published?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually just spoke to a friend about this who, or someone that I don't know that well, but who heard about my book and asked the same question. And I was happy to help. I mean, for me, like I mentioned before, the main thing was not to have the goal of publishing necessarily, though obviously that is amazing, but to have fun along the way. Like if I hadn't been having fun writing, I would have just stopped. Like it wasn't about about getting my words out to the world as much as like the enjoyable process of crafting and writing and rewriting and editing and all of that. So I would say to an aspiring author, like find a story and a format and a tense and a protagonist, like something that you really connect to and enjoy writing, because you're going to be reading those same words hundreds or thousands of times, So you better like it. And
You better. Yeah, that's
if you
right.
do that, then I think that joy and that passion will come through the page and make it more likely that a publisher will feel the same.
Jordon, are you going to continue writing time travel novels, or do you think you'll do something different?
I to a
Or will
degree,
you
I feel
write
that's
another one?
sorry, what was that?
Will you continue writing?
Right, right. It's harder to find time now. I have two kids instead of one. I have a
Whoa.
job, but um, to the degree that I'm able to continue writing, yes, I will almost certainly always stick in the time travel genre. That's the one that I really feel equipped to contribute to.
Sure, sure. Okay, well, Jordon, one more question, and that is, what is the message you'd like for readers to take away from the time stream verdict?
Um, it's not necessarily a book with a message or a thesis, but I think um, the themes of like fate versus free will and kind of just just doing what's right rather than letting
Mhm.
other people or other influences like dictate your actions, but doing the right thing is always
Right,
beneficial. And
right.
I hope they laugh a few times along the way. I hope it helps people appreciate time travel fiction. And
Very good,
yeah,
very good. Okay, well, Jordon and Peter, thank you very much for joining us today. And that's Jordon Berk's new book is called The Time Stream Verdict. And Peter, yours is called?
Line of defense.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you so
And
much.